Yeah, even with those approvals though, and how they buoyed the space, I want to get your perspective on some of the, I don't know if controversy is even the right word. I think it is. I mean, like with aducanumab, there was there was some, I guess, criticism post approval around efficacy data, around the finite number of patients that were seeing benefit, and a lot of that I don't want to dredge all of it back up. I mean, it played out over the course of a year or so, a couple of years ago. But I'm interested in your perspective on it, given that you're now working on the development of an antibody in the Alzheimer's space. What do what's your take? What do you make of that criticism and sort of the detractors who've questioned those approvals?
Yeah, and you're right. That story has been covered quite a bit, and I think a lot of things happened in that case. I think fundamentally what you're seeing is the challenges of blazing a new trail, and you see definite evidence that you're helping patients, but you're also seeing real limitations. And without going into the whole thing, and I'm sure you know the story. Some trial data positive, some trial data not positive. That's not that uncommon, especially in your early attempts to treat a population. And so fundamentally, that's my take on it, is that we're now seeing some therapies being approved that have been demonstrated to have a meaningful effect on the rate at which people are declining. Now, is that a cure? No, of course not. And I think the people involved with those programs know it's not a cure, but it's that first step that really can show that these processes and these approaches that we're taking can have meaningful effects on patients. And that's the way I think about it. There's plenty of room to improve from here, but being able to take that first step is, I think, sometimes underappreciated for just how hard it is.
Yeah, for sure. And just a quick follow-up to that on this topic, and then we can move on. But I'm just curious about your take on why maybe that kerfuffle, if you will, was seemingly more magnified than it would have been maybe in another indication, right? Like another indication where a drug's approved on maybe limited or even questionable efficacy data that doesn't get such splashy headlines and get so much noise around the controversy. It seemed like it was a sort of a bigger mainstream story with that approval. Is it because we're talking about an indication that is so widespread, touches everyone, sensitive? I mean, do you think that that's what contributed to the noise around that?
I think there's something to be said for that. I mean, going back to what I said a few minutes ago, when you think about the patients in need, and look, part of the reason I got into neuroscience is because I have my own family members who have challenges associated with various types of disease in CNS, not specifically Alzheimer's disease, but I have spoken with many, many people, friends, family, people that I've interacted with since coming to Acumen, and the stories are heartbreaking. It really is. It's a terrible thing to happen to both the person, but also to the family. And that generates a huge amount of interest in being able to treat this disorder. And I think, that probably contributes to the salience of it.
Mm.
Yeah, I wanted to ask too about kind of the role of biomarkers. You referenced the difficulty of, progressing of disease for a long time. It was really difficult to get even a good diagnosis. If you go back some years, and now we have, the amyloid beta biomarker, which has been very beneficial to drug developers. Are you fairly confident at this point, Dr. Doherty, that the so-called amyloid hypothesis is legitimate? We know for sure that amyloid, is a primary player in the progression of Alzheimer's disease. That seemed to be in question almost, around the approval of Aduhelm.
Yeah, and I think that that's back to not simply Aduhelm, but those decades of work that I mentioned earlier where therapy after therapy was not working. And of course, part of the challenge in any drug development is it the target that you're working on that's going to be beneficial or not? Or is it just the approach that you're taking or the particular drug you're working with? And when you're in the middle of it, you don't know the answer to that. And so, of course, after a number of lack of successes, you start to question, well, maybe this target is not as important, or it isn't important in the ways that we think it's important. But I think the more recent data does give pretty compelling evidence that amyloid is involved in the pathophysiology of Alzheimer's disease. I think it's also clear it's not the only thing involved. And that's part of this shift in going to the future that, okay, now we have some firm ground. And the question is, how do you expand out from this firm ground into understanding what's really going on in the brain for folks who are dealing with this disorder?
In a previous conversation, you referred to recent progress with Alzheimer's therapeutics as a beachhead that changed the conversation from can we address this disease to how do we optimize the way we're addressing this disease? I wonder if you could explain what you meant by that and where you see biotech contributing to the answer.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I do think that. And a beachhead is probably the right way to put it because, it's this moments when you're able to show, okay, we have evidence that we're benefiting patients for real, that in clinical trial data, large clinical trials, lots of investment, lots of time being taken, that you're benefiting patients. And so when you have that, couple that with, and we can talk about biomarkers, you mentioned them just a minute ago. I think it's a really important thing to mention. There's a lot of new information that makes this more tractable. And I think when people are looking at developing new therapies, one of the things you're looking at is, okay, is this something that we can provide some benefit to? And having those initial successes allows people to say, okay, here's the path, but we can do better than this. And so this is what we can do to differentiate from what's already been done. It sounds like a relatively straightforward thing, and maybe it is, but the reality is that the investment in producing a new therapeutic in any patient population is substantial, and you really want to have that firm ground to build from. So that's where I think we are. And I think the field in general, as I re-engage with people, it's an exciting time in that people are now looking at the progress that's been made and saying, okay, I see what we want to do next. How about we look at this? How about we look at this combination? How about we understand this biomarker population as a population that may do better on the treatment than others might do? And so you start to ask all those kinds of questions, which is really about trying to match the right patient to the right treatment. And until you get an active treatment, you really can't even start that process.
Right.
Your depth of, I'm sorry, Ben, did you have something else there?
No, go ahead, Matt.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Your depth of knowledge in the space. I mean, obviously your expertise in neuroscience speaks for itself. You're educated there, but your depth of knowledge in the therapeutic approach in the space is also sort of an uncommon thing in a biotech landscape that, I don't want to say it's dominated, but it certainly features, VC turned biotech CEO types, which I've spent plenty of time. Nothing against it. Like there's some great ones out there. But when I look at a potential guest for the business of biotech, as I mentioned from the outset, I look for things that are unique and different to me. And your unrelenting commitment to this space was one. Another was your title. You're President and Chief Development Officer at Acumen, and that's not a title combination. I would say that we see, sure, we have MD PhDs who are founders and CEOs and presidents of the companies we talk to, but maybe not, as specifically as Chief Development Officer. So I'm just hoping you can unpack a little bit about what that means. It appears to me, correct me if I'm wrong, that you're like the CEO or the president who's got a foot in the C-suite and a foot maybe in the lab.
Yeah, well, so I do think that my career, I've had some amazing opportunities, and being able to build a biotech company from the ground up. It's more than just one piece, right? It's more than just, is this the right program, or is this the right drug candidates, or is this the right trial? You have to string all those pieces together. And I see my role and the benefit that I have of being able to have gone through that process from the very beginning. So you mentioned Sage Therapeutics. When I joined Sage, there were about 10 of us, and we were just getting started. We had some really, as it turned out, good ideas, but not much else. And building a company to be able to take a couple of different therapies all the way from the lab through the clinic into the marketplace, amazing experience. And one thing you learn is a small group of people that are motivated and all pulling in the same directions can do some pretty cool things. But you also learn that nobody can do it by themselves, and the value of a team. And I think, that's what I see with going to Acumen, is being able to bring some of that thinking and to take what we think is a really exciting potential therapy for Alzheimer's disease, building off of all of that initial work that we were talking about just a minute ago, but then showing how you can match that to the right patients and maybe take the next step. And I think that's the perspective that I bring, because that's what I've learned from stepping through the process from the beginning of the lab through the end of the clinic. And that's what I'm hoping to bring, and I hope I am bringing to Acumen as we move forward with our treatment for Alzheimer's disease.
Let me jump on a quick follow-up to that, because when I see chief development officer, I can read that one of two ways. Like you're certainly qualified to be a chief drug development officer. In your role as president, you're also responsible for business development in many ways. Like that rolls up to you. Coming out of your studies in neuroscience, your time in pharma, your time at Sage, what would you kind of point to as the inflection points that enabled you or empowered you to wrap your mind around more than the development of science, but the development of a business, raising funds, managing people? And I know that that's inviting a big conversation, but if we could identify just a couple of inflection points. We have a lot of listeners who are perhaps aspirational scientists who aspire, right, to go into business, either to run their own companies or to just move into the business side of the companies they work for now. What does it take? What did it take for you? What were some of those inflection points?
Yeah, and there were multiple inflection points. And that's, I think, part of the message is that you've got to go through those transitions. It's another way to say it would be the best, even if you've got an ideal potential therapy, that's no guarantee that you're going to be able to get successfully through the whole process. It's a substantial process, both in terms of science, but as you say, also in terms of having a clear vision that you can articulate to potential investors, being able to make the case for why a particular approach is going to benefit patients, and to be able to continue to deliver those results as the story grows and as the asset gets farther and farther along. It's not straightforward, and the scientific training that a lot of us get, fantastic, but it doesn't teach you that. And so I think that is part of running any company, but certainly running a small growing biotech company, is being able to marry those two things together, to make the right choices, do the right thing from the scientific and the medical perspective, but also be able to do it in a way that will allow you to gain and maintain support for your program. And whether that's investors or whether that's employees or collaborators or vendors, there are many, many different audiences.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask, if there are any, maybe specific resources or people or experiences that you leaned into. I mean, some folks who are maybe in the position you were in at Sage, decide, well, I guess I better go get my MBA, or I guess I better like really lean into a mentor who can teach me the business side of biotech. Were there any sort of key moments or points or resources like that for you along the way?
No question. And for me, I think it was more finding those mentors and finding those folks who had some of this experience before. No substitute for that. I think I didn't take the pathway of going for an MBA or something like that. And then, as you say, people do that, and I'm sure you get benefit from that as well. But for me, it was finding those mentors and those folks who make you think about things a different way. Take the knowledge that you have and learn to apply it in a slightly different way. And, again, that's the kind of thing that's where the growth comes in. And honestly, that's where it's most exciting too, is where you can take what you've already learned and think about it in a new way.